Continuing the laws of Yom Tov, we're on page 267, Halacha 54. Food that is normally ground. We're talking about grinding now. Grinding usually is melacha on Shabbat. You're not allowed to do grinding. 54. Food that is normally ground in large quantities may not be ground in Yom Tov, even in small quantities. 55. Any food that may lose its taste if it's ground before Yom Tov may be ground on Yom Tov, all the best, in its usual manner, even with a specialized instrument such as a masher or grater. So let's say you have a spice or you have some food that is going to lose its taste if you do it before Yom Tov, so you would be allowed to grind it on Yom Tov. 56. One may grind fish, meat, or cheese in a regular grinder, not an electrical, obviously, on Yom Tov. However, if it could have been prepared before Yom Tov without losing its freshness, one should do it with a shinui. Shinui is a irregular way of doing it. Usually the biggest problem with Shabbat is slicing small vegetables very finely to make like an Israeli salad. That you have to do usually right before you sit to eat, right? Miyad. What about on Yom Tov? On 57, one may slice vegetables for a salad even very finely and even with a slicer. However, one should not slice more than what he needs for Yom Tov. So on Yom Tov, you're allowed to chop the vegetables for the Israeli salad even much in advance. It doesn't have to be within half an hour of the meal. It can be even much in advance because we're more lenient on Yom Tov with food preparations. 58. Matzah may be ground into a powder on Yom Tov since there's no prohibition of grinding something that was already ground up. Matzah was originally wheat that was ground up into flour, and now when you break the matzah again, you're grinding something up that was already ground. 59. Coffee may be ground in a small hand grinder, but not in a large grinder. Technically, on Shabbat, you wouldn't be allowed to grind coffee beans on a hand grinder, but on Yom Tov, you would be allowed to. In a small hand grinder, you would be allowed to grind coffee beans. Okay, weighing and measuring. 60. Unlike Shabbat, on Shabbat it's forbidden to measure stuff with rulers and with scales, right? You're forbidden to measure food items. On Yom Tov, you would be allowed to measure food flavorings and seasonings. Let's say I need to know how much to put in the pot for the spices. You put half a teaspoon, whatever it is. I'm allowed to measure out half a teaspoon on Yom Tov. However, this is only permitted if the wrong amount of seasoning could spoil the food and negatively affect it. But if it's not going to make a difference, then you shouldn't measure because, okay, if you put a little bit less, you put a little bit more, it's not going to affect the taste really. But if it will, then you will be allowed to measure. Furthermore, one may only measure this type of seasoning if he normally does so on a normal day. On a normal day, if you eyeball it, right, you don't really measure, so then you wouldn't be allowed to measure on Yom Tov. But if you really measure during the week, so then you're allowed to measure on Yom Tov as well. 61. Weighing meat is prohibited, even in weighing it in an unusual manner. Sometimes people measure the rice. They take specifically a cup of rice, 3 cups of rice, whatever it is. One may not measure a cup of rice on Yom Tov. Instead, one may only estimate an appropriate amount. 63. One may weigh and measure to fulfill a mitzvah, such as weighing matzah and maror on Pesach. Let's say I need to know how much to eat, like a zayit, right? I need to weigh how much I need to physically eat. So then you'll be allowed to do that on a mechanical scale, not an electric one. Mechanical scale on Yom Tov. Okay, good. 64. Kneading, right? Kneading a dough. Usually you're not allowed to knead a dough on Shabbat. 64. One is permitted to mix flour and water and knead dough on Yom Tov. Oh, let's say I want to make fresh bread. Can you make fresh bread on Yom Tov? Yeah, you can make fresh bread. Mix the flour and water, make it into a dough, let it rise, and then you put it in the oven, or you put it on the fire, and the fire was already on before Yom Tov, so you're good to go. Or you turn on the fire at alof, flame to flame. 65. One may beat egg whites or similar substances to make a whip or mayonnaise on Yom Tov. Usually that might be considered kneading, but this is for food preparation. On Yom Tov be allowed. 66. One may mix porridge or egg salad on Yom Tov without a shinui. On Shabbat, usually when you want to make thick substances, you gotta do it with a shinui. But on Yom Tov, you don't need to do a shinui whatsoever. What about sifting? On Shabbat, you can't sift stuff. That's borer. I want to sift flour. You're not doing that on Shabbat. 68. Since the store-bought flour used today is very refined and does not need sifting from common impurities, one may sift the flour to remove any insects. However, if you could have done this before Yom Tov, you should use a shinui, using the sifter backwards or sifting onto a table and not into a bowl. 69. Flour that was already sifted may be sifted again with a shinui to make it fluffier. I guess there was some sort of Yosef Chaim, do you mind closing the windows? It's already now it's like me and them are having a contest. Who's louder? Okay, good. Thank you so much. Borer. Now moving on to borer. The act of separating something from within a mixture is borer, which you're not allowed to do on Yom Tov. However, there are certain situations you're allowed to be more lenient on Yom Tov than on Shabbat. On Shabbat, what's the rule of borer? What's the rule of not selecting? The rule is, if I want to take something from a mixture, I got to take the good, I got to take it with my hand, and I got to take it to eat right away. Right? So, for example, there's a salad that has things I don't like in it. I'm only allowed to take what I'm going to eat. I can't take out what I don't like. I only can take what I like. It has to be with my hands or my fork, and not specialized tools, and it has to be to eat right away. What about on Yom Tov? Is halacha the same thing on Yom Tov? No, slightly more lenient on Yom Tov. 71. Selection that is normally done during the daily course of food preparations and that cannot be done before Yom Tov with the same results, you're allowed to do it on Yom Tov. While borer that is permitted doesn't need to be for immediate use, it can be used for later in the day. So on Shabbat, when you do borer, take the good from the bad, you got to use it right away. On Yom Tov, there's no such rule, use it right away. On Yom Tov, you're allowed to do borer early in the morning for in the late afternoon. That's another leniency of the laws of Yom Tov. Another leniency, you got to perform the selection the easiest possible manner. So by Shabbat, whether there's a lot of things you don't like, whether there's very little things you don't like, you're never allowed to take the bad. You always take the good. On Yom Tov, it's different. On Yom Tov, you should do whatever's easier. If it's easier to take out the good things because there's a lot of bad things you don't like in there, so you take the good things. But if there's very little bad things, there's a lot of good things in there, and a very few amount of the bad things, over there you're allowed to take out the bad on Yom Tov, and that's not considered borer. Why? Because it's considered the more convenient, and the laws of Yom Tov are more lenient, so you do the more convenient manner of doing borer, which is even taking the bad out when the bad is very little. Okay, on Shabbat that would never be allowed. Okay, 76. Just like on Shabbat, you're allowed to peel vegetables on Yom Tov with a peeler. 77. One may pick out clothing that one needs from a pile of clothing on Yom Tov, provided that he needs that article of clothing that day. Okay, so we said on Shabbat you're only allowed to do borer if you use within half an hour. But on Yom Tov, you're allowed to do borer even if you use it later that day. So if I pick out an outfit from a pile of clothing, I'm allowed to do that even though I'm not going to use it right away. I'm going to use it much later because that's the law by Yom Tov. Yom Tov is more lenient than by Shabbat. Baruch Me'olam.